we interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
This is our show, Special Report.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
This is a Midnight Hour show, Special Report.
If you're listening to this, you are the Resistance.
Welcome back, my friends, back to the Midnight Hour, and welcome to the Resistance. That's right, it's come to this. You see, my study of these strange topics had led me down some very strange rabbit holes. But lately, I've been realizing that most of those rabbit holes are full of bullshit. I'm so tired of wasting so much time while I'm looking for real information, having to sift through all of these fakes, frauds, charlatans, hoaxers, and yes, cosmic con men. Sometimes it feels like I'm thirsting to death out in the desert and I'm getting forced to drink from a fire hose, and then I do, only to find out that that entire fire hose was full of poison. So what are we to do? Just sit by and let all these fakes, frauds, and cosmic con men have their way? To destroy our own personal search for some kind of truth to these things? Or do we stand up and say, no more? Well, I've had enough, my friends, and I say no more. No more so-called researchers that are so lazy or so stupid they can't even do the most basic research to vet their sources, or so-called whistleblowers. I say no more. No more so-called paranormal talk show hosts who knowingly and willingly keep booking the same guys telling the same bullshit stories over and over and over again with no proof, no credibility, no evidence whatsoever, and no accountability whatsoever for doing that, for selling their soul to these cosmic con men. And for what? For likes, clicks, retweets, show listens? Is that what it's all about? I say no more. No more so-called scientific research UFO groups who are on the take, taking money from thousands and thousands of members, and doing what with it? Paying a cosmic con man to come to a conference and tell a bunch of bullshit stories with zero proof and zero evidence? And what about the leadership of this so-called scientific organization getting away with that? Isn't there any accountability for doing something so corrupt and so unethical? I say no more. No more so-called journalists selling a story about a secret space program survivor that took pictures of a gray alien on the moon. No more letting a journalist like that put those pictures behind a paywall and make people pay money to see pictures of this genuine gray alien taken on the moon by a secret space program astronaut. And then the pictures turn out to be from a video game cover. I say no more. No more so-called investigative filmmakers making a film about a so-called government insider and leaving out 30 years worth of evidence that that person was a liar and a fraud and a con man. No more letting so-called investigative filmmakers like that get away with purposely leaving out all the evidence that the subject of their film is a fraud just to make money. I say no more. No more frauds, no more fakes, no more hoaxers, no more show hosts on the take, no more cosmic con men getting away with stealing money from people for bullshit. Well, my friends, I guess the start of our special report will kind of tell you where my head has been lately, and has been for some time. And maybe, just maybe, I've been meditating and contemplating these things and not really speaking out as much as I should about them. But that time has passed now, and I feel like it's time to move forward and take the gloves off. And oh, am am I taking the gloves off. I'm done with pulling the punches, my friends. Because I do think we need a resistance to all these things. And who better to bring you that resistance than a man like me, a magician, a man trained in the art of deception and misdirection. Who better than me to see through the bullshit and lies and misdirection and half-truths? Who better than a man like me, a magician, to peel back all those layers of deception and bring you some kind of truth? You know, those guys on the take, the people making money from these bullshit stories, they're never gonna come clean. And some of these show hosts are never, ever gonna bring you the kind of truth that I'm gonna bring you. Because it's very clear, if you're paying attention, that some of these guys, they don't care about any kind of search for the truth. They don't care about evidence or facts or credibility. All they care about is getting a bunch of people to listen to their show so they can make ad revenue and make more money. It's all a con, folks. And yes, we've all been conned. Even me. But that time, I hope, is over now. See, the attacks on me and the hate mail and even death threats are kind of intensifying as of late as I've taken these gloves off. But me, I think it's important that you know that I don't care about those things. These people can do whatever they're going to do. They can say whatever they're going to say about me personally or about my show. But here's one important thing. My show's not monetized. I do not make a penny from bringing you my personal search for the truth. I don't make any money from revealing the truth behind these frauds, fakes, hoaxers, and cosmic con men. No, I'm not making any money. So when somebody says some negative shit about my show, just keep in mind that most of the people that are saying negative things are my so-called competition. The ones that are making money, doing this full time. They don't have real jobs. This is what they do. They sell bullshit. I do not have a financial motive here. I don't have a reason to sell you bullshit. I don't have a reason to have some fake fraud hoaxer on my show or some guy that just made up a bunch of bullshit stories. I don't have a reason to do that. And a lot of those other people do. And you need to be aware of that. You see, this whole field is like a multi-layered onion. And you gotta start peeling back the layers of deception and seeing past their so-called reality. That's what I've been doing here, folks. I'm peeling that onion, layer by layer. I'm getting through it. And I gotta tell you, folks, when you start peeling that onion, here's an important thing you gotta remember. Follow the money. All these people telling fake stories are making money. All these other shows that are knowingly and willingly helping these cosmic con men spread their bullshit stories are making money. It's a money machine, folks. It's a big club, but you ain't in it. No, you're there to provide listens for them. And I say that part of this resistance should be to hit them where it hurts them most, right in the wallet. That's right, folks. So if you're listening to any of these fake, fraud, storytelling bullshit artists, stop. Stop clicking. Stop liking their posts. Stop listening to their monetized videos and putting money in their pockets. That is one front of this new war. That's going to be how we starve them of that which they want most. And that is your money and your attention. And you know, I'm not going to specifically name all of these hosts, but most of you know who I'm talking about. If there's ads selling bullshit in between the bullshit storytellers that are selling bullshit, that's a pretty good indication that that person is on the take. I have to be very clear, There's some people with monetized channels that do a really good job at researching things and aren't included in what I'm talking about. But those hosts and channels are few and far between, folks. There's nothing wrong with making money from monetizing content that you're creating. The problem comes when these people care more about the money than the content that they're creating. At some point, most of them sell their souls and just start selling bullshit. Anything to get those clicks, those likes, those views, those listens. So I say that a big part of the resistance is going to be to starve these people of that which they want most. And once again, folks, that is your attention and your listens, your views. So we can vote with our attention, our listens, and our views. If somebody's out there having guests on their show that they haven't vetted, that have fake educations, that are telling fake stories, that have no proof, no documents, no evidence, no corroboration, then I say we should turn our backs on those people. We should starve them of the attention that they crave. That is also connected to the money that they crave. This will be one front on this new war. This will be part of our resistance. And I have to say, my friends, recently I was listening to one of these so-called paranormal talk show hosts. And this is a talk show host that has the biggest cosmic con men in the world today on his show more than anyone. And he was talking about, I guess, justifying why he had them on his show. And he said he believed in freedom of thought and freedom of speech. And he wants people to be able to speak their mind, and then the listeners can decide. That's a cop-out. That's a complete and total cop-out. He's trying to justify why he has these people on his show so very much, and he never, ever, ever confronts them with all the lies and deceit and deception and fraud that they have already been called out on by other credible researchers. He doesn't ask them the hard questions. And you know, if that show host truly believed in freedom of thought and freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and he wanted his listeners to, I hear this term, use your discernment. You know, if he wanted his listeners to decide whether they were telling the truth or not, then, hey, how about you show the other side of the coin? If you're going to have these fake, fraud, storytelling bullshit artists on your show, then why don't you have somebody like me, or Dark Journalist, shout out to Dark Journalist, or C.W. Chanter, or Joe from the Carolinas on your show with the fake, fraud, storytelling bullshit artists? Why don't you give your listeners both sides of the coin? Why don't you ask these frauds the hard questions that some of those people I just mentioned, along with me, are asking? You won't do that because you're out there selling bullshit. If you truly believed in freedom of speech and freedom of thought, and you really wanted your listeners to decide if they were telling the truth or not, you wouldn't just present their side of the story. You would show the listeners the other side of the coin, and you would let someone present all the evidence that they were frauds. But you never ever do that, do you? No, you don't do that. You justify why you have them on your show so much. You make excuses while you're selling, I don't know, coffee or vitamins or some other nonsense, and enjoying all that ad revenue that you're raking in, having these storytelling bullshit artists who do happen to get a good amount of people to tune in to your show. That's the reason you do it. Don't justify it and talk about freedom of thought or freedom of expression or freedom of speech or discernment. That's a cop-out. It's a coward's way of justifying being an asshole who sold their soul for clicks, likes, and listens and ad revenue. That's what it is. And let's call it what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's stop pretending. Come on. And another thing that this person talks about is, oh, I won't have personal attacks. I'm not gonna have somebody personally attack my guests or me for having my guests. Listen, proving that somebody is lying or someone's educational credentials are fake or some part of their story is not credible is not a personal attack. That's letting people know the truth. It's not a personal attack to say that this person is lying and here's why. But you don't have the backbone that it takes to have that happen. So you hide behind discernment and you hide behind freedom of thought and you hide behind, I just let people talk and let my listeners decide. Let's let your listeners know the whole story, then let them decide. But you won't do that because you're a coward without a backbone that does not have the balls to do it. Some of us have those balls. Some of us are going to let people know the truth. And then, you, my friend, are going to be exposed for what you are. Just another guy on the take selling bullshit. And hey, you might have a bigger microphone than me, but that's okay. Because I'm on the side of truth and reality. And you're living a delusional life, selling bullshit. How long do you think that facade, that illusion, can be kept up? It's already starting to crumble. Pieces of that wall and that defense that you have built up around yourself are already starting to crack. And it won't be long now before that wall crumbles and you're left naked. And I gotta tell you, you're going to get exactly what you deserve. It's already started to happen, hasn't it? Because karma is the all-powerful governing law of the universe. And you've already started to get that karmic backswing, haven't you? Because one of those cosmic con men that you, for years and years, have done nothing but help and support and promote has turned on you. And man, it's like a Julius Caesar Shakespeare play, the way it all played out, isn't it? Just when you thought that the story couldn't get any stranger, this cosmic conman pulled his blade out and stabbed you so viciously in the back that everyone was shocked and amazed and horrified watching the truth play out. And what did you do? You somewhat acknowledged what happened. But you did nothing. And you by and large said nothing. And I gotta tell you folks, where I'm from, I grew up on the cold hard streets of Philadelphia. And where I'm from, if someone who was a loyal friend, co-worker, and confidant and supporter of you for years suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed you in the back and got caught doing it, and you said nothing and you did nothing, I gotta tell you folks, that, where I'm from, is what we call a bitch. That was a bitch move. A bitch does that. A bitch lets some guy stab him in the back and says nothing and does nothing. That's what a bitch does. A man with any pride, with any dignity, with any sense of self-worth would not say nothing or do nothing. Honor alone demanded that you do something, and you, by and large, did nothing. See, where I grew up, folks, respect was everything. And if you let someone take your respect, then you were a bitch. And now, to me, and to many other people, that other show host lost all respect, and he became just another bitch on the take, afraid and too cowardly to do something to defend himself when somebody stabbed him right in the back. And now, my friends, I guess I should say I'm not going to apologize for that opening rant, but I will explain that I felt like that was necessary, like I needed to get some things out of my mind and into the webverse, right? I needed to just put those thoughts out there, that stream of consciousness. I needed to get some things off my chest, and I have to say, having done that, I feel better having done that. I feel like I've purged my soul of this ugliness that I don't really want to hold inside anymore, and I'm not going to do it anymore. The truth is, somebody needed to say those things I just said, and I make no apologies for doing so. And I also should explain that my normal show format is a long format. It's 2 hours long with a guest every time, and this is something new for us. This is a special report, which really, I'm not going to have a time constraint here. I'm going to go until I've done what I need to do here. And so these new broadcasts, these special reports, are not going to have a guest. It's just going to be me presenting some things that need to be presented. Because, quite honestly, our long format show format is not good for time-sensitive research I'm doing, or for things that I need to get off my chest, or things that I need to put out there quickly. It's just not a good format for that, trying to jam a guest in there and give them adequate time. So I guess this is an experiment to see how things go with these special reports. And we're going to get into the subject of our special report, which I can't wait to present. And now, let's move on to the actual subject of today's special report. And that is Pete Peterson and the GoFundMe money scandal. And that's what it is. And I don't care what any defenders of David Wilcock and Pete Peterson will say. It's a scandal what happened. And I'm going to try to explain it from both sides of the coin. And I've given David Wilcock an opportunity to explain why he did what he did and explain where the money went, because still to this day nobody is quite sure where the money went. But David Wilcock has not responded to any of my tweets, and I have to say that those tweets are public record. I haven't deleted any of them. Every time that I've tweeted to David Wilcock, it's out there. People can verify that I did tweet to David Wilcock and say, hey, people are saying this, what happened to the money? Silence and the sound of crickets. That, my friends, is what you get when you ask David Wilcock what happened to almost $60,000 that he helped raise for Pete Peterson, the so-called whistleblower. But I gotta tell you, there are many sides to this story, and we are about to go deep with new, never-before-heard information that I'm going to present about Pete Peterson for the first time tonight. Now, I also do have to thank and acknowledge the research and support of Bill Ryan of the Avalon Forum. Project Avalon Forum has a huge database of information and research, and I pulled some of the best bits that I'm going to talk about tonight from the Project Avalon forums. Now, I'm not just going to regurgitate what people got as far as information on the Project Avalon forums. I'm going to show you, I suppose, where this journey took me. And I'm going to take you on that journey with me. Because I wanted to know, and I think you do too, did David Wilcock, or Gaia TV for that matter, do any research whatsoever into this man before putting him on a world stage and making a whole bunch of money off of him, calling him a top secret government insider and whistleblower? Did David Wilcock, or Gaia TV for that matter, do even the least little bit of vetting of this man's education or credentials or claimed accomplishments before doing that? Don't you want to know the truth? Let's find out. So before we get to the GoFundMe possible or alleged scam, possible or alleged federal wire fraud, I think it's important that we start at the beginning. We have to start with Pete Peterson. Who is he? Where was he educated? Where did he work? What accomplishments is he claiming in the technology field? I think these are important starting points, so I wanted to start there. And I started with his online biography. And I gotta tell you folks, as soon as I read it, red flags started going off in my head. And here's why. This man claims to have an extensive list of accomplishments in the computer field. I went to college for computer science. I was a 4.0 student, by the way. And I gotta tell you, as soon as I read it, I immediately thought that everything in his biography was a complete and total fabrication. But I wanted to be sure. So, let's get into it. Now, I'm going to be providing links to my source material in the description box so that you can read, this stuff along with me. But we're going to start here, which is an announcement from a company called Media G3, which, by the way, used the hiring of Dr. Pete Peterson as a public relations stunt, I would say, or at least as propaganda to attract new investors and new, I suppose, stockholders to invest in this company, Media G3. So they made a big announcement claiming that Dr. Peterson's solid track record of accomplishment expected to strengthen the company and contribute significantly to the company's expansion of digital projects and services. In this announcement, they talk about some of his accomplishments and his background. And I'm quoting directly, an experienced technologist, Dr. Peterson has over 30 years' experience in software design and architecture. Among Dr. Peterson's notable accomplishments are the design and development of the first commercially available microprocessor-based computer in 1977. In 1977, Dr. Peterson founded Cyberdyne. Does Cyberdyne as a company sound familiar to anybody else? Because it did to me. So Dr. Peterson in 1977 founded Cyberdyne, a company that designed, developed, manufactured, and sold the first commercially available microprocessor-based computer, which was created to include an alphanumeric QWERTY-style keyboard. His revolutionary design was also the first computer equipped with a built-in printer, a 16-segment character display, and a built-in operating system, and 3 built-in high-level programming languages. His computer design preceded the official release of the Apple I by 2 years, the Commodore PET by 2 years, and the introduction of Radio Shack TRS-80 by 3 years. Now, I gotta tell you folks, when I read that, having an extensive knowledge of computer history, especially in regard to early 8-bit computers, personal computers, I gotta tell you folks, as soon as I read this, alarm bells started going off in my head. Because I know about early personal computers and 8-bit computers. And I gotta tell you that everything that I just read to you is a complete and total fabrication and lie. Nothing in those statements that I just read to you is true at all. Nothing. First of all, my friends, anybody in the computer industry or that has studied computer science or that knows anything about personal computer history, anybody like that would know that the Apple I was released in April 1976. So that was before this man claims he even formed his company, right? So his design would need to have been done in 1974 and released in 1975 if the Apple I with an alphanumeric keyboard was released in April 1976. So what's the story? Did Gaia TV and David Wilcock not even go check Wikipedia to see when the first commercially available personal computer was released? And I got to tell you that the Apple I wasn't really the first personal computer to be released. Most people would say that would be the Altair, but that did not have an alphanumeric keyboard. So let's give him that. Okay, he's talking about the first commercially available personal computer with an alphanumeric keyboard. But the Apple I was released before he's saying that his computer was released. And anybody, a grade school child could have gone on Wikipedia and read that and verified the Apple I was released before they were saying his computer was released. But David Wilcock, I suppose, he was either too stupid or too lazy to actually vet his so-called whistleblower. And so was Gaia TV. And I gotta tell you, folks, that we're only 1 or 2 lines into his bio. We're not even through the first paragraph really yet, and we've found a whole bunch of lies and fabrications so far. But it gets better than that. I was so, I suppose, kind of taken aback by these fantastic claims made by Dr. Peterson that I wanted to be absolutely sure that the information that I'm presenting to you, my audience, was completely and totally accurate. So here's what I did. First, I guess I gotta mention, look at the name of the company. Cyberdyne? Really? Cyberdyne is the name of the computer company in the movie Terminator 2 that created Skynet. Cyberdyne Systems, of course. So that should be a red flag right there. But I wanted to be sure that maybe I wasn't, wrong. Maybe, listen, ask anybody that knows me. I've got a big collection of old computers. I find them to be a curiosity. I've got old Commodore computers, Apple computers. I've got old Atari computers, all 8-bit, really old stuff. I've got TRS-80s. I've got Tandy Color computers, all 8-bit, old, early personal computers. But I thought maybe, just maybe, this was one of those weird little offshoot companies that I'd never heard of. So I wanted to be sure. And you should know, folks, that there is something called vintage computer museums around the world. People who collect these old, early 8-bit first personal computers, restore them, repair them, and sort of show the public, like, this is where we started. And that's a great and wonderful thing and service that these people do for humanity. So I called everyone that I could find. I stopped at around 8. 8 vintage computer museums around the world, and not one of the curators or, the people who ran those organizations had ever heard of Dr. Pete Peterson or his claimed first commercially available microprocessor-based computer. Not one. I called my old computer science professor who, grew up punching cards on mainframes. I mean, I don't want to say that old professor of mine is old, but he knows computer history. I sent him the bio, he looked at it, and he called me back and he said, "Is this some kind of joke?" That's exactly what he said to me. "Is this some kind of joke? Really? This guy started Cyberdyne? Did he create the Terminators too?" So that's an accredited actual computer science professor that looked at this bio, just the parts that I'm talking about so far, and said, this is completely and totally bullshit. This is all a fabrication. This man never created a company. There was never a computer like he described in this bio ever manufactured or sold. And let me be clear, In the bio, he says that that computer was bought by every major university and company. And no one that I know has ever even heard of his company. No one that I know in the computer science field, including vintage computer museums, ever heard of Dr. Pete Peterson or Cyberdyne as an actual real company from the 70s that ever created, let alone manufactured, a computer as he described. So where do we go from here? We go back to this point that I'm going to hammer over and over and over again. David Wilcock did not do any vetting of this so-called whistleblower. David Wilcock did not do the least little bit of, he didn't do 5 minutes of research into this man's background before putting him on the world stage, before running out into the UFO community and the conference circuit and making, David, you tell us, how much money did you make selling this man's bullshit? David never even took the few minutes it would take to check Wikipedia about this man's claims in the first few lines of his bio. He just ran with it. It's a great story. Let's not let facts and evidence and credibility and actual history get in the way of a good story I can sell. David the Cosmic Con Man Wilcock did nothing to vet this man's claims in his own biography that's out there on the internet. Now let's explore the other side of the coin. And that is that either David Wilcock did absolutely zero research into this man's biography and claimed accomplishments, or he did, and chose to ignore that he knew that this man's entire, first paragraph of his biography was a complete and total fabrication. We're only up to the first paragraph, folks. I got a lot more to go. It's going to get good. Or it's going to get bad and much worse, depending on your point of view, I guess. But settle in, it's going to be a bumpy ride, folks, because it gets even crazier. Before we get back to his crazy claims of having invented the first microprocessor-based computer that was mass manufactured and bought by every major university, let's talk about his education. Now here's the strange thing about Pete Peterson's education. He claims that he holds an associate's degree in science and engineering and a PhD in natural philosophy from Golden State College, now known as Stanford University. I gotta tell you folks, that set off another red flag, because you go ask any PhD student or graduate, anybody that's ever got a PhD, you go ask them if they got into a PhD program with just an associate's degree. I guarantee you, my friends, you can go ask 100 people and you're not going to find one person that got into a PhD level program with just an associate's degree, which is usually a 2-year community college degree. So, where do we go from here? Well, I was unable to find any source for where his associate's degree in science and engineering came from, but this line that he has a PhD in natural philosophy from Golden State College, now known as Stanford University, that seems strange to me, because I assumed that Stanford University had just been Stanford University since its inception. So I called Stanford University, and what I can tell you after, spending a few hours on the phone to verify this, is that Dr. Pete Peterson, or Gary Peterson, that's his actual legal name, did not receive any PhD from Stanford. And I checked with the enrollment people, I checked with the yearbook people. He was never ever enrolled there. And Stanford, and they have like a person there that is in charge of the archives and history of Stanford University. It's a very prestigious university. And they confirmed for me that they have never ever been called Golden State College or Golden State University. And I used, I did my due diligence. I used his real full name. I also had them check under Pete Peterson, so we've checked under Gary Peterson and Pete Peterson at Stanford University. Nobody has ever heard of either Gary Peterson or Dr. Pete Peterson at Stanford University. Now, I was able to find that there is a degree mill named Golden State University. And isn't it funny that someone like Bob Lazar, another claimed government insider whistleblower, had a degree from a degree mill, Pacifica University, and here we have another fake fraud, bullshit, storytelling, so-called whistleblower or government insider that's also perhaps, I don't know, but he said that he had a degree from Golden State University that is now known as Stanford University. Stanford University was never ever known as Golden State College or Golden State University. It has been Stanford University since the first day it began. So, I suppose it's just speculation on my part that maybe he got a degree from one of these degree mills. And to be clear, what a degree mill is you pay them $200 or $300 and they send you this really fancy framed degree that you can hang up and say you're a PhD now, you're a doctor. But it's bullshit. You don't go to one class, you don't take any tests, you don't submit any papers, you just give them a couple $100 and they give you a fake degree that you can hang on your wall and impress your stupid friends with. And now, my friends, that we have fully debunked this fake doctor's educational credentials as being most likely a complete and total fabrication. And by the way, David Wilcock, you owe me an apology because I had to spend a few hours of my day when I could have been at the playground with my son calling Stanford University for you because you were too lazy to do that before you took this fake whistleblower and ran with him selling his bullshit fake story. You could have called Stanford University. You're the guy that made the money. Maybe you should give me that money because I did the work for you, David, you lazy slob that didn't have a few hours to call Stanford University and verify that this man's educational credentials were completely and totally a fabrication. I did it for you, David. And you know what? I got a young son. He wanted to go to the playground today, and I'm an asshole because I was like, "No, son, I gotta call. I'm on the phone, son. Go play with your toys. I gotta call Stanford University and verify if this guy is a fake or not." I did that for you, David. I made the sacrifice that you were unwilling to make before you ran to a global stage and a multi-million-dollar media company and put this guy on a stage to sell his story so that you could make some money. I did the work for you, David, you lazy slob. Now, let's get back to his fake, fraudulent claims of having invented this incredible early personal computer. Again, I called vintage computer museums. I know a few people who run those things. Nobody ever heard of them. But I wanted to be sure. I wanted an expert witness. I wanted somebody that was beyond reproach as far as early computer development and history as far as personal computers goes. I wanted an expert. I wanted to talk to somebody that everyone in the computer industry would know and respect and completely and totally believe as far as his opinion on this biography. So I went to Dave Haney. Dave Haney was a real and true early personal computer pioneer. He worked for Commodore and Commodore Amiga. Anybody in the computer industry can look up Dave Haney, and most people that know anything about computers or the history of personal computers, they don't need to look up Dave Haney, but he happens to be a friend of mine, so I went to Dave. I sent him the bio and I told him I need to know for sure that this guy's claims about inventing this computer or manufacturing this computer that every university bought is real or bullshit. I need to know for absolute certain. I need to know for sure. And Dave Haney, a real early personal computer pioneer who contributed to the Amiga computer. Look that up if you're not familiar with it. This is a guy who knows what he's talking about as far as computer science, computing history go. So I sent him the bio, and here is what he sent me back. He said, and this is Dave Haney in a personal message to me, he said, I have never heard of a personal computer company called Cyberdyne in all my years. Of course, that's the name of the company that created Skynet in the Terminator movies. It's also the name of a robotics company in Japan, but they took the name from the movie, of course. Now, in regards to Dr. Pete Peterson's claim, he said the MOS technology Kim1 was out in 1976. It was a single board computer, included an alphanumeric keyboard and multi-segment display. It was, as you might expect, intended for hobby use. And of course, Dave Haney worked for Commodore, and he said, the Commodore PET shipped in January of 1977. My best friend bought one that summer. So he's way off on that. And if he's claiming to have founded a computer company in 1977, he certainly didn't have product shipping by January of 1977. The Apple I was out in kit form in April of 1976. The Apple II shipped in June of 1977. A few guys at Commodore, particularly Chuck Peddle, were helping Woz work out the bugs on the Apple I and II in those days. The PET wasn't simply the 6502 like so many early computers, but the whole series of 6500 series chips that Peddle and Company developed. Chuck had used a mainframe computer for with basic commands before coming to MOS technology. And that's why the PET needed I/O processing and, of course, BASIC. Commodore bought a one-time snapshot license for Microsoft BASIC on the 6502 for early development. And then he jokes and calls it the Trash 80. Was introduced in August of 1977. Yes, the same year as the PET. And he said, if you expand your search a bit, you can look at the first hobby computers like the MIT's Altair 8800, which was first introduced in late 1974. The Intel 8080 and Motorola 6800 were just out then, while the 6502 microprocessor-based machines and Z80 processor machines didn't arrive until 1975. Now again, Dave Haney is a recognized pioneer in the personal computer industry, especially early personal computers. And this is what else he had to say. He said, if such a computer was actually being produced even in 1977, there would be evidence, photos, magazine articles, etc. I used to read kilobaud microcomputing back in those days. Nothing that happened wasn't covered. He gave me a complete list of the archive of that particular early computer magazine, and I did an extensive search. No mention of Dr. Pete Peterson or Cyberdyne or his claimed computer or manufacturing or creating that computer was ever mentioned in that archive. He gave me another source. Another is Creative Computing Magazine, and they were around starting in 1974. They also covered pretty much everything that happened in the personal computing industry at that time. Naturally, any company could have cobbled together a computer for their own use that no one knows about, but if this man is claiming that every university bought this computer, there would be evidence, there would be photos, articles, or information available even today about that computer. I thanked him, and then he also said, this is Dave Haney speaking again, of course. He said, and I'd ask for critical details before accepting the story, along with photos, ads, etc. I'd want the technical specs, what CPU did it use, what built-in high-level languages did it supposedly run, who made the display and the printer. And he asked about who made the display and the printer because lots of those things were not easy to come by in those days, and early manufacturers did not manufacture the display and the printer. They bought them as components and then put them into their computer. He said, This bio sets off my BS meter, and the only thing I found on Google in this guy is basically the same bio that you attach, nothing more. A good point that he made is he said, now Google me or some other person who was actually involved in this kind of stuff at the time and see what kind of hits you get. That's another big clue. And I did that. And go Google Dave Haney. Dave, D-A-V-E, Haney, H-A-Y-N-I-E, and see what kind of Google hits you get on him. There is an amazing amount of information on Dave Haney and his contribution to early personal computers. There is nothing on the supposed Dr. Pete Peterson or his claims of having founded a computer company in 1977, let alone having manufactured a computer in 1977 that was bought by every major university. I called the computer science departments of 10 different colleges that are well known for computer science. I spent a great deal of time today on the phone, and no one had ever had a computer as described by Dr. Pete Peterson. No one had ever heard of Cyberdyne or Dr. Pete Peterson. And I was lucky enough to talk to a few people that had been professors in the computer science department since, in one case, one professor was there since 1972. And he looked at the bio and he said, this sounds like a bad science fiction story or bio for somebody from a science fiction story. This is not reality. And I agreed with him and thanked him for his time. And again, my friends, we're only up to the first few paragraphs of this man's outrageous, crazy claims, and none of them have come true. And it's important to realize this, that he said in relation to this computer that he had invented and manufactured, that computer was 2 years before the Commodore PET was introduced, 2 full years before the Apple I was offered to the public, and 3 years before the introduction of the Radio Shack TRS-80. Go check the dates again. Those statements are absolutely, positively a fabrication. His claims are wrong. Even whoever wrote this fake bio for him, which I could speculate who I think may be responsible for writing this fake bio, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to say whoever wrote the bio didn't even do their due diligence in researching, because it was not introduced 2 years before the Commodore PET, or 2 full years before the Apple I was offered to the public, and 3 years before the introduction of the Radio Shack TRS-80. Rewind if you need to, but even his bio about that claim is complete. Even if he did invent this computer in 1977, it was not 2 years before the Commodore PET was introduced. It was not 2 full years before the Apple I was offered to the public, and it was not 3 years before the introduction of the Radio Shack TRS-80 computer. Lies, and fabrications, my friends. That's what we have here in this bio full of bullshit. And again, all these things that I did to verify this so-called doctor's claims, this was not rocket science. This was picking up the phone. This is basic journalism, basic research, basic fact-checking. And I have to say, listen, I'm not an expert at this, but I got a telephone. I know how to pick it up and reach out to somebody to verify, to fact check if something is true or not. I'm not an expert in this. I haven't been at this for 20 years like David Wilcock. David Wilcock has been at this for 20 years. You would think that somebody like me who's just kind of starting out is really not as good as David Wilcock at doing this kind of stuff. So what is it with David Wilcock? Was he just too lazy to do the work to verify these claims? Was he too stupid? I can say a lot about David Wilcock and what I believe about him, but I don't believe he's stupid. I think that he either didn't do any research whatsoever, because look at all we've debunked so far with a few phone calls, right? A few hours of work, and we have totally ripped apart this so-called whistleblower as being a fraud. And David didn't do it. He just didn't do it. He could have done it. You know, I would think, just for my own credibility, if I was going to go on a multi-million-dollar media network with a guest and present his story, maybe it's just me, but my personal thing, you know, like my personal way of doing things would be that I would go and check all these things. And then, to be quite honest, I might still bring the guy on, but then I would gotcha him. I would bring up all these things I found and ask him all these hard questions. Like, if you did this, if you manufactured this computer that every major university and corporation bought, why has no one ever heard of it? David Wilcock didn't ask those hard questions. He didn't ask any hard questions. He just took this man's bullshit story and ran with it. That's what he did. That's what he does, folks. That's all he does. And I have to say, folks, there's another show host that I mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast. And that's the same show host who has heavily supported David Wilcock, who has heavily defended David Wilcock, who has heavily promoted David Wilcock, and also helped David Wilcock promote this GoFundMe scandalous, alleged scam where people donated money to this man as a whistleblower. And this guy, of course, this show host says, oh, personal attacks. You can call this entire broadcast a personal attack. It's not going to change the fact that I just revealed that David Wilcock did absolutely zero research into this man before presenting him as a secret government insider and a whistleblower. And this show host supported David Wilcock doing that. Even helped him tell some of these bullshit stories related to this so-called whistleblower. And you know, this other show host, I'm sure, is going to say that this entire broadcast is just a personal attack on David Wilcock, and we don't need this kind of negativity. This is not a personal attack. This is me exposing that David Wilcock willingly and deliberately, apparently, did zero research on this man. Or he did his due diligence and did plenty of research and just failed to mention all of the facts and evidence that I am presenting tonight. So who's the bad guy here? These guys are not going to shut me up. I'm not going to play nice in your playground full of asshole UFO dickheads selling bullshit stories. I'm not going to do that. So you can say I'm making personal attacks. It's not personal. It's not at all personal. This is me getting to my personal truth about these things. This is me doing the work that the guy that made all the money off of this guy didn't do. I did the work. I'm asking the hard questions that this show host was too cowardly to ask. And that's another thing. Why didn't that show host go and do this research? He's got a phone. I think he knows how to pick it up. He's got hands. He's got a mouth. He's got a voice. We all know he's got a voice. Listen, this is not a personal attack. This is not me being negative. This is me exposing the truth. And if I'm the bad guy for that, then so be it. I'll take the slings. I'll take the arrows. Keep on sending your hate mail. I'm going to keep doing it. You're not going to shut me up. And my friends, like I said, we're only 1 or 2 paragraphs into the bio, and we're already into a treasure trove of bullshittery that I have exposed. Let's get a little deeper. Let's dig a little deeper and find out more. And the shocking details of what I'm about to reveal, I couldn't even believe myself. But let's go there. What I have found looks like a stock pump and dump scam or con. It looks exactly like something that a con man with a fake fraudulent list of fake fraudulent achievements in the computer industry would be involved in. And this, his fake bio, was posted. Yes, his fake fraudulent bio full of fake accomplishments in early computing history would be used to solicit investors and people to give money to a new startup company because he is going to use his knowledge, experience, and all of his incredible inventions to contribute to this new startup company and make those investors a shit ton of money. And in this article, they claim that an experienced technologist, Dr. Peterson, has over 30 years of experience in software design and architecture. Among Dr. Peterson's notable accomplishments are the design and development of the first commercially available microprocessor-based computer in 1977. And again, we get the same information from that bio that I was reading you, that in 1977, Dr. Peterson founded Cyberdyne, a company that designed, developed, manufactured, and sold the first commercially available microprocessor-based computer, which was created to include a QWERTY-style keyboard. And again, we get the lines about that he created this computer. His computer design preceded the official release of the Apple I by 2 years, the Commodore PET by 2 years, and the introduction of the Radio Shack TRS-80 by 3 years. So here is a technology multimedia computer company startup that is soliciting investors based on Dr. Peterson joining their company. And their CEO at the time, is also in the article, said Dr. Peterson is an extraordinary pioneer in the history of computer development and engineering. He has blazed a trail of computer innovation with worldwide impact, and we are honored to bring him on board for participation in the advancement of our company. His undertakings have significantly impacted the evolution of the computer industry, and we expect that his contribution to the company will continue to make history. Folks, I gotta tell you, as soon as I read this, I could not believe it. First of all, any technology company worth anything would have checked this man's education. And apparently, this company, Media G3, did not do that. Any company would have checked his claims of being an early computer pioneer. And apparently, this company, Media G3, didn't do that. And let's present the other side of the coin. Maybe they knew that this guy was a fraud, but they got this great bio. And maybe, just maybe, and of course, I'm speculating, but here's the facts. They posted his bio as factual. But before this startup technology company, either knowingly or unknowingly, posted the fake fraudulent bio of an early fake fraudulent computing pioneer they just hired, they actually posted something else you should know about. They posted a notice to the Securities and Exchange Commission withdrawing their ability and their eligibility to sell stock. And in that notice, which is a legal filing given to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they valued their current stock price at 1 penny. It seems a little strange to me that just a few short months after withdrawing their ability to sell stock with the Securities and Exchange Commission, their termination of their eligibility to sell stock, and saying, gee, our stock is only worth 1 penny, they come out with this story that they hired this early computing history pioneer with all these amazing accomplishments, like creating the first microprocessor-based computer and beating Apple and Commodore to the market, and Tandy, Radio Shack with their TRS-80. He beat them to the market by years. And now he's joining our company. He's going to be on our board of directors. And we expect him to continue to make computing history. Now, I'm going to ask my listeners to use their discernment. I'm going to let my listeners decide. What does this look like? Does this look like something that was ethical or moral? This whole story of this company? What computer company in the world would not know that this man and his fake, fraudulent accomplishments in his bio that they posted looking for investors was not fake and fraudulent? The answer, my friends, is obvious. No computer company, no startup technology company in the world would not know that this man's bio was full of lies and fabrication. Why did this happen? I need to know. I'm going to look a little deeper. I've reached out to this company's CEO, but so far they won't return my emails or calls. Imagine that. And let's imagine what happens next. But we don't need to imagine because it's all public record. This company continued to try to solicit investment in their firm, based, I suppose, in large part on the hiring of this fake, fraudulent, early computing history pioneer. Now, I'm still digging, and I have to tell you that I'm not done yet. But it doesn't look good to me, folks, because shortly after posting that, if you look at their website, which has, they attempted to scrub from the web, but I've got copies of everything, they were posting a lot of information about sharing information with shareholders and investors and things like that. And then, suddenly, and without notice, the website was suddenly gone. Under construction for a long time, and then eventually completely and totally gone. So I ask you, what happened with this company? Did they knowingly and willingly and deliberately use a fake, fraudulent, early computing history pioneer's bio to solicit capital and investment from investors and then go belly up on purpose? Or did they do it by mistake? Did they just not check? The choice is yours, my friends, but I know what I believe at this point. I'm still digging, and any future developments I will report on here on the Midnight Hour. But just to recap, this company files a legal filing with the SEC saying we're withdrawing our ability or eligibility to sell stock, and our stock is now worth a penny. Then they post on the internet that they hired an early computing history pioneer who beat Apple and Commodore and Atari and Tandy to market with the first personal computer with an alphanumeric keyboard and a microprocessor by years and years. Except he didn't, because he was a complete and total fraud. And then they solicited money and capital and investors. And then they went belly up. Your guess is as good as mine as to what the truth is in regards to this. But I gotta tell you, folks, doesn't look good. This whole story about this startup technology company and their fake, fraudulent, early computing history pioneer that has all these accomplishments that were fake and fraudulent and fabricated in his bio, I don't know, folks. It kind of sounds like something a con man would be involved in. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. Leave some comments in the comments section here. I always love hearing from my listeners and getting feedback. Do you think that was a con? Does it sound like a con? Does this sound like something a con man would be involved in? What do you think? Okay, my friends, so besides all of these claims about being an early computing history pioneer that we've proven to be completely and totally fake and fraudulent in his bio, Dr. Peterson also claims that he was elected by the Russian Academy of Sciences as the 18th member of the board of directors of the Russian Astronautics Association for Mankind, the Russian equivalent to our NASA. I'm sorry, folks, that doesn't pan out. You can go do some checking, and I could talk for an hour about all the work that I did to try to verify that claim as being true. No. There's no mention of a Dr. Pete Peterson or a Gary Peterson ever working for the Russian equivalent to NASA, period. I did a great deal of checking. I called the Russian embassy, spoke with a very nice Russian embassy worker who told me that she would make a lot of phone calls and call me back to try to verify that. No, nothing of that came back as true. No, they had no records, no mention of a Dr. Pete Peterson or a Gary Peterson ever having worked for their Russian space program in the history of their Russian space program. Another claim from his bio is that he had previously been awarded the Gold Order of Lenin for his work in satellite antenna technology, speech clarification methods for astronaut communication, medical diagnostic technology, and in pioneering and assisting in the building of orphanages, orphan-specific educational systems, and orphan-built and run children hospices and medical care centers in numerous towns within the CIS, Confederate of Independent States, the old Soviet Union, after the fall of the wall. Well, my friends, when somebody claims that they won a really prestigious award like that in a bio, it's very easy to either verify that claim or prove that it's false. So again, I called the Russian embassy and spoke with someone else, and they got me in touch with someone who was a Russian historian and who had the complete list of everyone that's ever been awarded the Gold Order of Lenin award. And the Gold Order of Lenin is like our, Medal of Honor or whatever the American equivalent to the highest civilian honor would be. And so after a lot of research and work, I got to a Russian historian who had the complete list of everyone who's ever been awarded the Gold Order of Lenin. And surprise, surprise, folks, there is no Dr. Peterson, Dr. Gary Peterson, Pete Peterson, Dr. Pete Peterson. No one like that is ever in the history of the Gold Order of Lenin award been actually given that award. So that's another fabrication, another fake, fraudulent accomplishment of Dr. Pete Peterson that no one has ever taken the time to, verify as true or false. I have now verified that as being completely and totally fake and fraudulent as far as an accomplishment. He never received that. Period. End of story, folks. And again, I suppose I'd like to ask Mr. Wilcock, why did you not call the Russian embassy? Why did you not find a Russian historian familiar with that award? Why did I have to do it? It's kind of ridiculous. You put the guy on TV. You put the guy out there as a secret government insider. And you made all the money, right, Mr. Wilcock? How much money did you make selling Dr. Fake Peterson's fake bullshit stories? How much money did you make, David? We have a right to know. And are you going to give all this money back? He's not giving any of the money back, folks, but I'm going to keep asking him to. Now we're going to move on to another claim in his bio, which is also listed on the GoFundMe page, and that is that he is one of the top scientists, technology problem solvers, and is widely considered as the single most valuable and prolific inventor, known as Mr. Do by President Ronald Reagan. So actually that's two claims. And also, not in his bio, but I have another source where he claims that he was a technology and science advisor to Ronald Reagan. So let's start with the first one, that he's a prolific inventor. Here's what I did. Another thing that David Wilcock was either too lazy or too stupid to do. I went to the U.S. Patent Office where you could do a patent search. I searched for Gary Peterson, Pete Peterson, and although I found some people with similar names, I did not find a single patent registered under this man's name, either of them. His real name, his fake name, I don't know why he would have a fake, first name for when he's a secret government whistleblower, but he does. But I looked under Gary and Pete Peterson. There is not a single patent listed under this man that I could find. So, is that a lie? Considering all the other lies that are on his bio, I'm inclined to believe that it is a lie. Now, on to the next claim that he made, that he was known as Mr. Do by President Reagan. And that he is one of the top scientists, technology problems, and considered one of the single most valuable assets to the government. Okay, so in a separate source, he claimed that he was a science and technology advisor to Ronald Reagan. And this, my friends, is another thing that's easy to verify. So what I did is I called the Ronald Reagan Library, where they have an archive of all of Ronald Reagan's papers and meeting schedules. Advisors would all be in that library. And I talked to a very kind archivist there. And that archivist was kind enough to do an exhaustive search through the entire Ronald Reagan. They have databases of everything. And he came back, called me back, and on the record would state that there is no Dr. Pete Peterson or Dr. Gary Peterson or Pete Peterson or Gary Peterson that was ever an employee, especially a science and technology advisor of Ronald Reagan. In fact, there is not a single mention of Pete Peterson or Gary Peterson in the entire Ronald Reagan library, folks. That means that this is another fabrication. He was never a science and technology advisor to Ronald Reagan. I doubt he ever knew or met Ronald Reagan. This is just another fabrication, folks. And to be clear, I went back to the archivist and I said, well, what if he worked on classified projects? And the archivist explained to me that even science and technology advisors that worked on classified projects, there wouldn't perhaps not be a mention in the Ronald Reagan library of what the conversation was when Ronald Reagan would have a meeting with that advisor, but there would be records of those meetings. So in other words, let's say John Smith is a climate control expert and he has a meeting with Ronald Reagan. There is a date and time, documented proof that, that Dr. Smith met with Ronald Reagan at this date and time, and if it's not a classified subject, there may be meeting minutes talking about what was discussed between the President Ronald Reagan at the time and that technology or science advisor. In fact, every meeting that the President has with any advisor, there is some record and archive made of that exchange. There is zero records of Dr. Pete Peterson, Gary Peterson, whatever you want to call this guy. There is zero records of any meeting with Ronald Reagan. I even asked him if he could search Mr. Do, and he did and said, I came back with nothing. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. So on this claim of, being buddy-buddy with Ronald Reagan, that's most likely another fabrication. Now, again, I want to ask David Wilcock, why could you not do these things? You didn't go to the U.S. Patent Office and search for any patents under this man's name. You just didn't do it. Or you did. And you didn't want the truth to get in the way of a good story you could sell. Right, David? So you left it out. Those are the only two possibilities. I mean, I guess a third possibility might be that you're so incredibly incompetent you didn't think to do any of this stuff. And again, David Wilcock could have called the Ronald Reagan Library and verified that this top secret whistleblower that he's out there selling knew Ronald Reagan and was so buddy-buddy with Ronald Reagan that Ronald Reagan gave him a nickname. He didn't do that. And folks, again, this is not rocket science. It's a few phone calls. David Wilcock could have picked up the phone and easily verified these two parts of this man's biography and story. He either didn't do it or he did it and decided not to mention that he found nothing on those 2 points in this man's bio. Because it's a good story, and David Wilcock always needs something to sell out there at the UFO conferences and in his books. Now, folks, we're kind of going fast and furious here, but I have a lot to cover. We're going to go into the next claim in his biography, and that is that he comes from a long line of inventors, including his grandfather, who was Tesla's right-hand engineer at the Colorado laboratory. From a young age, he was trained in the secrets of Tesla technology, maybe by his grandfather, right? Since his grandfather was Tesla's right-hand man at the Colorado laboratory. Wow. And isn't it convenient that they throw Tesla in there, since a lot of people interested in these strange subjects and conspiracies, are interested in Tesla too. It's always funny that they go at this like a fiction writer, because that's what his biography is so far, folks. It's fiction. I wanted to know for absolute certainty whether him and his family had any relation to Tesla at all. So here's what I did. I spoke with a Tesla biographer who has written books on Nikola Tesla. And he had never heard of anyone named Peterson who worked with or for Nikola Tesla. And this man who's written these books on Tesla is a recognized expert on Nikola Tesla's life and work. He said, and I quote, "There is no evidence of anyone named Peterson ever working for or with Nikola Tesla in Colorado or anywhere else that Nikola Tesla ever worked. There is no documents or evidence to support such claims, and I feel truly very confident in saying that this statement is absolutely untrue." So, again, let's keep hammering this. David Wilcock could have found somebody that was an expert in Nikola Tesla, and there's more than a few experts on Nikola Tesla, his history, his life, and his work out there in the world that you can reach out to, and you'd be surprised. If you're respectful in your approach and, ask nicely, that these guys would be willing to call you back and help you with some information. And that's what happened in my case. David Wilcock could have done that. But again, folks, he chose not to, or he did and knew that whole line about this guy's grandfather being Nikola Tesla's right-hand man was a complete and total lie and fabrication. Those are the two possibilities, or again, there's always the third possibility that he's just too stupid, or just too incompetent, or just too careless, or unethical to bother to do the research that I have shown you today. Now, folks, we have to move on to another line that is extracted from David Wilcock's book when he's telling these stories about Dr. Pete Peterson. And that is that he helped design some of the craft and other technology the secret space program used. This included advanced computer chips that are far more powerful than anything we have in the commercial world, featuring photon-based transistors instead of those using electrons. Pete's chips have a staggering 144 cores each, running at speeds vastly in excess of any current technology. Now, let's go back to that pump and dump scheme with that company that hired Dr. Peterson in order to try to solicit investor donations. And the fact that that company, after hiring him, went completely and totally belly up and out of business. Listen, folks, ask anybody you know in the computer industry. If somebody had a brand new kind of microprocessor that had 144 cores running at speeds vastly in excess of any current technology, remember there was a line in that announcement from that company that his processor designs and technology would be, used to advance their company. If he had 144 core processors and he was hired and his technology was going to be used to advance that company, there's no way it would be a company selling penny stocks. There's no way that a company with that kind of a technological leap forward over Intel, over AMD, over, RISC and IBM and PowerPC. There is no way that a company with that kind of edge or advantage would be selling their stock for a penny. So I call bullshit on that. And I also call bullshit on photon-based transistors, because those, ask a physicist, ask somebody that's really, really well educated in electronics. There may be something called a photon-based transistor, but it's sort of theoretical. It's not practical. There's no way that this guy is 20 years ahead of all the leaders in those industries, those physicists that are working on that kind of stuff. There's no way. And there's no way that he would join a company and here's my 144 core photon-based microprocessor that's 10 or 20 years ahead of what AMD and Intel and everybody else has, would just go out of business suddenly. And here's another point I want to make. That company that he joined was making these announcements like they were this big technology leader. They were a little storefront in a strip mall. A little tiny storefront in a strip mall. That's what that company was. And I suspect, and again, I'm going to state, quite honestly, it's speculation, that whole thing was a pump and dump scam. And what a pump and dump scam is when a company will make a bunch of announcements on the internet to try to lead people to believe that their stock's going to go through the roof, and then they get people to buy stock or invest money in them, and then they just take all the money and go out of business. And I think it's very telling that this so-called secret government insider was definitely involved in something that really looks like a con or a scam exactly like that. Now, again, I reached out to a few people I know in the computer science field and told them about this claimed processor that Dr. Peterson invented or had, and all of them just kind of laughed. They said, this is science fiction. And I'm talking about high-level people that are, really on the cutting edge of processor technology. They would know, and I trust their judgment. And they said that a claim of a 144-core processor made years ago, now, by the way, these claims were made years and years ago, that has never surfaced, never, shown the light of day, is science fiction. That's what it is, folks. The claim of any kind of photon-based transistor microprocessor with 144 cores, it's science fiction. If it existed, this guy would have patented it. He didn't. Okay? He didn't patent it. That wouldn't be classified, would it? Especially not if you're going to give it to a company that just hired you. You couldn't give a classified thing from the government to a company that just hired you, could you? That would probably be illegal due to NDAs and all of that. So it's bullshit, folks. There's no 144 core photon-based transistor microprocessor that this guy invented. If he had that, he would be a billionaire, folks. He would be a billionaire. He wouldn't be on GoFundMe begging for money to save a house that's not even his. And now that I've mentioned that, it's time to wrap this thing up as best we can, and let's get into this GoFundMe and the actual text that was involved there. Wilcock is also so lazy that he doesn't realize that when he says things in his posts, anybody can call or, write and verify some of the things that he's saying is either true or complete and total bullshit. Now, the big problem that I have with the GoFundMe is this. They're on a GoFundMe soliciting donations for a secret government insider. And my friends, here's what they said, and because I want to be very clear, I have the actual text of the GoFundMe in front of me. It says, Pete Peterson is a well-known figure in the Exopolitics Full Disclosure Project and Stillness in the Storm communities as one of the most important whistleblowers of our era, who has shared with us his wealth of information via David Wilcock's narrative. Multiple members of our community would like to show Pete that we stand with him in lieu of recent events which took place at his home. 2 weeks after 2 Cosmic Disclosure episodes featuring Pete aired on Gaia TV without any explanation, armed police surrounded and entered into Pete's home, taking everything he owns, including tools, equipment, and his mother's and wife's ashes, to be buried into a bulldozed hole. Pete was then threatened and guaranteed 90 days in jail if he came within a mile of the dump site. Okay, friends, so first of all, I'd like to ask why no one from the Full Disclosure Project ever did all the research that I've presented tonight to prove that this Pete Peterson was a complete and total fraud. No one from the Full Disclosure Project did that. Aren't you interested in disclosure, or are you interested in pushing lies? Whoever's running that Full Disclosure Project. And what about, oh, and by the way, that's Corey Good's manager runs the Full Disclosure Project, as far as I know. And Stillness in the Storm community. Why didn't anybody from Stillness in the Storm go and do all the research that I've presented tonight and prove that this Pete Peterson was a complete and total fraud and not a real whistleblower? They didn't do that. Are they only interested in pushing lies? Why didn't they do the research? And, of course, David Wilcock. Again, I'm going to say it again. Either David Wilcock did not do even 5 minutes of research into Pete Peterson, or he did and knew that he was a fraud, but he knew that he could sell the story, or he's completely and totally incompetent as a researcher. Now, what they're doing is they're saying this man is a whistleblower when they either knew he wasn't or never took the time to verify that he was or was not an actual secret government insider. And they say that multiple members of the community would like to show Pete that we stand with him. And they also say recent events which took place at his home. I take issue with that because there are various reports that, number one, the home that this whole GoFundMe is based on was not his. It was never his, period. That home was not owned by him ever. His name was not on the mortgage. He had absolutely zero claim to that. And in court, he had some kind of claim saying, you know, that was my common law wife's home and she died and now it's mine. And the court said, no, you have no claim to this home. So in the GoFundMe, they're saying these recent events took place at his home. There are also various reports that Pete Peterson did not live in this home for a year before before the GoFundMe. He has been living in an apartment, not in this home. He was just storing things at this home that they're mentioning in the GoFundMe. So even that line is deceptive and fraudulent to say these recent events which took place at his home. You know, when I think of home, I think of where someone lives. He didn't live there. That's a lie. That's the first lie, you know, in this text begging for money for this fake whistleblower. And now let's go to the next line. 2 weeks after 2 Cosmic Disclosure episodes featuring Pete aired on Gaia TV, without any explanation, armed policemen surrounded and entered into Pete's home, taking everything he owns. These are lies, folks. These are total lies. First of all, without any explanation, you can go, and it's public record, and I want to thank Project Avalon forums who had archived the PDF file, which have all of the documents related to this property that Pete Peterson, you know, is claiming all of this stuff about. And in those documents, you will see 5 writs of eviction. Five court orders that are telling him you have to remove your belongings and vacate the premises. 5 times prior to the GoFundMe page being posted, he was given these notices by law enforcement. He had to be served each of those in person. He had to get those papers in person in order for the court to recognize that he was notified. And I got to tell you, I talked to some people that work in mortgages and foreclosures. Usually people get 1 writ of eviction and then the sheriff comes and tosses them out and all their stuff out. Pete Peterson got a writ of eviction 5 times. So this line in here where they say, without any explanation, armed policemen surrounded and entered into Pete's home, taking everything he owns, is a lie. It's not without explanation. He got 5 notices. 5 times he was served. You ever been served papers? It's really kind of scary. A guy in a suit will sort of creep up on you, ask you if you know, are you Stephen Cambion? You've been served, and hand you these papers. And then he has to go back to the court and swear to the court that he saw you in person and handed you this paper. So 5 times Pete Peterson got these writs of eviction ordering him to remove his belongings from a home that he did not own, that he had no claim on, and vacate the premises, but he wasn't living there, so that's not really relevant. But he was told, you have to get your things out. You have to take your things out. They say it happened without explanation. That's a complete and total lie. He got an explanation 5 times before he went to David Wilcock crying and had David Wilcock help him with this GoFundMe con. The next line, armed policemen surrounded and entered into Pete's home, taking everything he owns. Again, I can't stress enough how incompetent David Wilcock must be, because he's making claims against the local law enforcement in that line. And I gotta tell you, local law enforcement don't like to be dragged into some Men in Black bullshit conspiracy if they had nothing to do with it. So here's what I did. I called the local police department. And I was actually surprised because, I'm a little, let's just say, distrustful of law enforcement in general. But I had to do this. So I called the local police department, explained the situation. I sent them this GoFundMe and the documents and the claims that armed policemen surrounded and entered into Pete's home. I got back the answer from the local police department, which was this. No armed policemen from the local police department, local to this home, ever surrounded or entered into Pete's home, period. No armed policemen ever took anything from that property. And in the GoFundMe, they say that they took everything he owns, including tools, equipment, and his mother's and wife's ashes. I got to tell you, folks, the local police department kind of laughed at this, and they said that would never, ever happen. There was all these court orders in place. We wouldn't go into a home, even if it was a foreclosure, and take somebody's mother or wife's ashes. That would be crazy, and we could be sued out the wazoo. We would never, ever do it. It's ridiculous. So the local police department is refuting David Wilcock's own explanation, which he posted on his Twitter, on his YouTube, and going on Jimmy Church, saying this stuff, that armed policemen surrounded and entered into Pete's home, taking everything he owns. The local police absolutely refute that, and I gotta say that it's really stupid of David Wilcock to accuse law enforcement officers of illegal acts on a public internet forum like Facebook or on his public Twitter, going and posting these things. I'm really starting to think that he is stupid, because only a stupid person would go accuse a bunch of cops of doing something completely and totally illegal in order to scam people into donating to this GoFundMe. That is a stupid thing. Then we get this voicemail message. I heard it. I'm not even going to bother to replay it. If you want, you could go onto the Avalon forums. Just, Google Pete Peterson, the truth about the GoFundMe, and you'll be able to listen to that. And it was on an interview with Jimmy Church on Fade to Black that they played this, the police are here and they're taking everything and all this stuff. And Wilcock goes on to somebody's show and promotes that as truth when it never happened. So Pete's lying about it, and David Wilcock is going out on public internet forums accusing the local police of absolutely illegal things. It's not very smart to do that, folks. You don't accuse law enforcement officers of doing something illegal. It's not in your best interests to do that. Let's get into this next part, which I think is very, very important. David Wilcock has publicly stated that he's going to inherit all that stuff. And it's worth millions and millions of dollars, all the contents of the house that the police the armed guards came in and stole. Okay? Whether he's going to inherit it or not, nothing in that home was worth millions of dollars. And here's why. On the Project Avalon forums, you can go there, like I said, and check out all this information. Somebody, a curious forum member, decided to go. They were local, and they decided to go that day or, during that time frame to the actual property. And what they found was 2 people in hazmat suits from the bank cleaning out a very hazardous condition inside that house. That house was filled with dead cats and bottles of piss and mold and all manner of, you don't go into a house for the bank with a hazmat suit because it's safe in there, folks. And the local neighbors described Pete Peterson as a hoarder. So you can imagine what was in this house if you've seen those hoarder shows on television. That's what the bank was dealing with. This was not, tools and equipment and scientific laboratory stuff worth millions of dollars. So that's another David Wilcock lie. I got to tell you, it's not looking good for David Wilcock and Pete Peterson here. To me, this is looking more and more like a con. And let's get back to the multiple statements that David Wilcock has said that the police were going to take all these possessions and bury them into a bulldozed hole. He's also said the bulldozers are there, this is going to happen. Nobody saw any bulldozers at the site, folks. All they saw is two people from the bank in hazmat suits trying to clean the tremendous hoarding mess that Pete left inside this home that he did not own and had no claim to. The next line, Pete was threatened and guaranteed 90 days in jail if he came within a mile of the dump site. And this is in relation to those armed police officers. And again, the local police completely and totally refute this statement. They never threatened Pete Peterson. They never guaranteed him 90 days in jail if he came within a mile of the dump site. In fact, there was no dump site. And the local police refute that there was ever any plan to bulldoze anything. There was never bulldozers there, not from local authorities, not from the bank. The police did tell me the bank sent someone after Pete Peterson never, responded to those 5 writs of eviction to get his stuff out of there. Eventually, the bank sent somebody there to clean out the hoarding nightmare mess with dead cats and bottles of piss and all manner of things that Pete Peterson had filled this property with. Pete Peterson, according to the local police, was never threatened, or they never even spoke to Pete Peterson. They never guaranteed him 90 days in jail, and there was no dump site. There was no dump site, folks. There was people from the bank cleaning a hoarding nightmare mess out of this property. There was no dump site. And these are all things that are in the GoFundMe that are completely and totally not factual that David Wilcock was pushing in order to get people to donate to this GoFundMe. Now the next line, simultaneous seizure of his truck and trailer left him without transportation. I don't know anything about that. I haven't looked into that. That line might be true. Maybe his truck and trailer got confiscated. But let's get back to the actual home. This home was not owned by Pete Peterson. He had no claim to it. He was storing all this stuff in there that by most accounts was completely and totally worthless and worthy of a dumpster. It was just a huge mess inside there. At least that's what the local police told me. It was a huge mess, and the bank paid somebody to clean it up and clean it out. Now, this whole GoFundMe was predicated on the police were coming in and stealing all of his property, and we got to help him. The police didn't do that, folks. That's a lie. Okay, that never happened. And I even have a problem with this GoFundMe where they say his home. It wasn't his home, folks. It wasn't his home. It was never his home. His name was not on the mortgage. It wasn't his home, folks. And another important point that I want to make is that there was other rumors floating that the bank's trying to take his home, so we have to contribute to this GoFundMe and help him, Maybe he can pay the bank back with the money we generated. He could not pay anything because his name was not on the mortgage, folks. There was no saving that home because, in fact, that home was foreclosed on and sold by the sheriff. It's called a sheriff sale auction. And that happened at, 2 p.m. on January 15th, 2015, according to all the foreclosure documents that I have here in my possession. It says, and whereas said sheriff did at the hour of 2 o'clock p.m. on January 15th, 2015, long, my friends, long before the GoFundMe was ever even posted, January 15th, 2015, after due public notice had been given as required by the laws of this state and the course and practice of said court, duly sell at public auction at the main library of the Boise County Courthouse, Idaho City, Idaho, pursuant to said decree and the provisions of law, the premises in said decree mentioned, which is the home in question. And I got to tell you, folks, that happened a long time. The house was sold at foreclosure a long, long time before the GoFundMe. And then they started sending him writs of eviction because they wanted him to vacate, I guess at that point would be just his belongings from the premises. He was no longer living there. For at least a year, by all reports, he was in an apartment and just left some of his possessions there. That's crazy, folks. The house was foreclosed on in 2015, and all this time later, after he got 5 notices to get his stuff out of there, he never did. And now, he's calling David Wilcock saying armed police are here, with bulldozers and they're going to destroy all my stuff. He had 5 notices to get his stuff out. And there's another important part in these foreclosure documents which prove beyond any doubt that his possessions were never in danger of being lost. And I'm going to tell you why. Because, folks, there's another legal part of this, and this is included in this foreclosure documents PDF. And I'm just going to read this to you. It says, "Now, therefore, in the name of the state of Idaho, you are hereby commanded to cause defendants and their goods and I think the word is chattels to be forthwith removed from the inside residence," and then it gives the address, "and the plaintiff is to have restitution of the same." In other words, the bank is ordered to remove the contents of the property and give restitution of the contents of the property to Pete Peterson. In the event the goods and I hate this word, I don't know what, chattels, or is it chattels? chattels, inside the residence are not promptly removed thereafter by the said defendants, you are authorized and empowered to cause the same to be removed to be a safe place for storage. And many people have commented on that. This legal mumbo jumbo means that the bank was told, yes, you can remove the contents of the property, but the property belongs to Pete Peterson. So you have to allow him, you have to remove the contents of the property and give that property to Pete Peterson. You have to allow him to go inside and take his property. And if he fails to do so, then the court authorized them to do it for him, but place the contents of that property, the property that they're talking about in the GoFundMe, into a safe place for storage. So what we have here is proof in legal form in these PDF documents of all the foreclosure legal stuff in relation to this home and this property. Here is proof that his property, right, his belongings that David Wilcock is on, is saying are being bulldozed, was never in danger. There was never any danger that his property or belongings were going to be bulldozed. The court ordered that his property, that they give him an opportunity to go and get his property, and if he failed to do so, they could remove the property, but they had to place it into a safe storage area. This is another lie then, folks. The property of Pete Peterson contained in that residence, in that home, was never ever in danger of being lost. All he had to do, this Pete Peterson, is go and get his stuff. He didn't own the home, he had no right or claim to the home, but he had all this stuff in there. All he had to do was go and get his stuff and he could have it. Failing that, if he failed to do it, the bank could remove it, put it into a storage space, and then he could go to the storage space. And I talked to somebody that works in mortgages. Oftentimes, maybe the bank will say, well, you have to pay storage by the month. So if it takes you 4 months to come and get your stuff, you have to pay the 4-month storage that we had to pay. They have the legal right to do that, but still, you have the right to go to the storage and get your belongings back. His belongings were never in danger of being lost, period. That's a fabrication, folks. That's a lie. So now we have more proof that this GoFundMe was started and predicated on a lie. And it's also important to mention that the people that talked to people on the site there said that the property was all worthless because Pete Peterson was a hoarder. And David Wilcock's running around going, oh, this is my inheritance and it's worth millions of dollars and it's going to make me financially solvent for the rest of my life and I'm going to lose it. So he's not just appealing to everybody to feel bad for this whistleblower. He's appealing to all of his fans. Like, I'm going to lose millions of dollars worth of inheritance if we don't, save his property that I'm going to get when he dies. I don't know. I'd like to ask David Wilcock, like, what was worth millions of dollars? Was it the dead cats? Was it the bottles of piss? That's what was at the site, according to people that were actually on the site and were witnesses. David Wilcock was too lazy to go to the actual site and see what was happening. David Wilcock was too lazy to do a public record search and find all these foreclosure documents and legal notices that we have here. He didn't do that, folks. He could have done that and known the truth. So which is it? We've already proven that he was just too lazy or too stupid to vet this man's background, and we've proven that this man's background was a complete and total lie and a fabrication. David Wilcock could have done that research. He didn't do it. He just took the man at his word, I guess, and ran with the story. Or he knew it was fake, folks, and he ran with the story anyway. And in the same way, David Wilcock could have verified this man's claims about armed police destroying his property and bulldozers. He could have done a public record search and got all of these foreclosure documents and found out that the house was foreclosed on in 2015. He could have found out that this man's property was in zero danger of being lost because the court ordered that he could get it, or that the bank had to remove it and place it in storage and he could get it. He could have done that, folks, and he either was too lazy and too stupid to do that, or he did do it and went ahead with some kind of scam with this GoFundMe thing anyway. Those are the only two choices, folks. I've been saying for a long time that David Wilcock is the world's worst fake psychic. That's another thing. He's supposed to be a psychic. Why didn't he know that this whistleblower was actually a fraud and a fake? He's psychic. He's intuitive. He should have known this stuff. Why didn't he know that the stories about the armed police and the bulldozers was all a lie and a fabrication? He's psychic. He's an intuitive. He's Edgar Casey reincarnated. He should have seen this stuff coming, folks. Now, I guess we really should focus on the money. Follow the money, folks. That's what you do in an investigation. And I wanted to follow the money. I wanted to know who posted the original GoFundMe request for everybody to donate to that thing. And so far, I've been unable to find any real person that did that. In his social media posts asking people to donate to this cause, David Wilcock does give this sort of weird name of somebody, Coco La or something like that, that posted, and it said they're a fan of Pete Peterson that want to help him. I have my own suspicions of who is actually responsible for writing the text of the GoFundMe, especially because it was about a 50% copy and paste job. And as previously reported, all of David Wilcock's books are 50% cut and paste jobs. So that made me suspicious. And since I have been unable to find any real human person that will speak to me and admit that yes, I wrote that text or yes, I posted that GoFundMe, I have serious suspicions about who actually did that. But again, I have no proof, so I'm not going to speculate here, but you can probably imagine who I believe wrote that text and posted it to the GoFundMe, who I believe truly and actually started that GoFundMe fundraiser. And oh, don't worry, folks, I'm still digging, and I'm sure there is more dirt to be dug up on this. And as developments arise, I will report them here on the Midnight Hour. Now, the final point is that in the GoFundMe, it states that all of the money will be given to David Wilcock, who will distribute the funds to Pete Peterson. But so far, I have not been able to find one human individual who can confirm that the money actually went to Pete Peterson or where it went. That is, except for Corey Good, Blue Chicken Cult Leader, Secret Space Insider. I'm sorry, I don't trust him. I have not been able to find one credible person who will tell me that David Wilcock actually did what was stated in the GoFundMe text and received the funds and distribute them to Pete Peterson. And so far, David Wilcock has not provided any proof of what happened to those funds after he was given them. So folks, if we follow the money and we follow the evidence, here is what we have. We have a GoFundMe fundraiser that was started by an unnamed fan of Pete Peterson that no one has so far been able to speak to directly at all. We have a GoFundMe fundraiser with a body of text that is filled with lies and fraud. So far, that's what we have. We have the proof through GoFundMe that almost $60,000 was generated from that GoFundMe, and per the text body, that those funds were given to David Wilcock. And so far, we have zero proof, zero evidence whatsoever that Wilcock, as described in the text body of the GoFundMe fundraiser, actually distributed those funds to Pete Peterson, as was its intended purpose. But it's important to point out that even if he did get the money and give it to Pete Peterson, the entire GoFundMe, the text body that was in this fundraiser, was filled with fraudulent information and lies about Pete Peterson. This is not looking good for either David Wilcock or Pete Peterson. So many of the people that contributed to this GoFundMe, who I've been privately sharing information with, are starting to get pissed. And they want to talk to David Wilcock, and they want their money back. Because so far, no one has been able to verify with conclusive proof or evidence where the money went. And like I said, I don't know. Where did the money go? I have to tell you, David Wilcock, if you're listening, people are starting to get pissed. And when people get pissed, they start taking action. So, the window that you had to explain yourself or to calm the people that contributed money to this cause that are now pissed, and rightfully so. Anybody that contributed any money to this should be pissed. Because first of all, nobody knows where the money went. Where's the money? And secondly, all of this money was generated based on lies. All of it was based on lies. All the things described about what was happening to Pete Peterson were lies. So people want to know, where did their money go? Where did almost $60,000 just suddenly disappear to? And listen, folks, I did my due diligence. I tried to find out where the money went, but I can't follow the money if people block the trail. People, for a long time, have said that nobody knows where this money went. I want to ask my listeners, do you remember that scandal with GoFundMe where a couple and a so-called homeless veteran got together and colluded to do this GoFundMe scam, and then they raised all kinds of money? And then they got caught because what they put in the text of the GoFundMe to try to raise the funds was not factually accurate. Now, remember what I've just told you about all the lies that were told in this GoFundMe soliciting people to donate. That's all lies, folks. It's all not true. So they're asking people to donate money based on lies. And that, my friends, I believe, is fraud. I think that rises to the level of the technical and legal definition of fraud. But I gotta say, folks, I have to reserve judgment because I'm not a lawyer. I'll leave the lawyering up to people that are real lawyers, like C.W. Channer. Shout out to C.W. Channer. Maybe C.W. Channer can investigate this a little more and give us some more information about whether this is fraud or not. And I encourage him to do so. Now, to the true believers who still want to believe that this man is somehow a secret government insider who's giving you all this top secret information, I want to recap some of the lies that we've already caught this man in. First of all, being an inventor, he has 0 patents. Those are probably lies. Forming a company called Cyberdyne, I forgot to mention this. When you form a company, you have to file paperwork with the state. And it took a great deal of time, but they said they formed his company. He formed the company Cyberdyne in 1977, so I did a public records search. There is no company in any state in the United States called Cyberdyne formed in 1975, 76, 77, 78, 79, or 80. I checked for all those years. No such company called Cyberdyne. So forming a company called Cyberdyne, that was a lie. Beating Commodore, Apple, and Tandy to market by years with the first commercially available microprocessor-based personal computer. We called vintage computer museums. And we had Dave Haney, a recognized early pioneer in early computing history. A person who is beyond reproach as far as being trustworthy, and he says that is a lie. The vintage computer museums all say that that statement is a lie. They never heard of Cyberdyne, and he did not beat it to market. Every major university buying his computer. I called 10 major universities that are all known for being somewhat focused on computer science. Nobody ever heard of Cyberdyne or buying his computer. They've never had a computer from Cyberdyne or the computer that he's describing. That was a lie. Being a Ronald Reagan science advisor, we called the Ronald Reagan Library. There's no mention of Pete Peterson anywhere. He was never a Ronald Reagan science advisor. That's a lie. His grandfather was Tesla's right-hand man. We spoke with one of the biographers and an expert in Nikola Tesla history. And that man said that that statement was a lie. Let's see. He worked for the Russian equivalent of NASA. We called the Russian embassies and got definitive information that no one named Dr. Pete Peterson or Gary Peterson ever worked for the any Russian space program, period. That was a lie. He said he was awarded the Order of Lenin Award by Russia. Again, I got a list of every recipient of the Lenin Award that has ever been given the Lenin Award. There is no Dr. Pete Peterson. There is no Gary Peterson. There is no Peterson ever got a Lenin Award by Russia. They said armed police entered his home and took his belongings. That was a lie, folks. We talked to the local police. That never, ever happened. They said that police took everything he owns, including tools, equipment, and his mother and his wife's ashes, to be buried in a bulldozed hole. That was all a lie, and we confirmed that with the local police. It never happened. This was a fantasy and a fabrication. Pete was threatened and guaranteed 90 days in jail if he came within a mile of the dump site. Again, the local police say that was an absolute lie. Never happened. They just can't go and do things like that, folks. So, I'm going to ask you, if all of these things in his bio and all of these things mentioned on the GoFundMe and that David Wilcock has been going around stating as fact are all in fact lies, what are the chances, folks, that he really worked on top secret projects for the military or the government? If he's lying about all of these things, what are the chances that he's telling the truth about that? I'm going to use a line from another show host. Use your discernment, folks. That's what you got to do. You decide if he's telling the truth or not. I know what I believe. I believe he's a complete and total fraud and a con man. And I believe that there should be consequences for this. You can't go on GoFundMe and post a bunch of lies, raise $60,000, and then just keep the money. You can't do that. That's a crime. You cannot do that. And Pete Peterson is not above the law. David Wilcock is not above the law. There are laws in this country. You can't just post a bunch of lies on GoFundMe and collect a bunch of money and keep it under false pretenses. That, my friends, is a crime. And they're going to have to answer for this. They're not just going to walk away from this. It's not going to happen. I can't really say what's going to happen next, but I can say this. I have so far talked to 10 different people who donated to that GoFundMe, and all of them are going to GoFundMe and filing complaints, or going to their banks and filing fraud complaints, and they want their money back. So I'm advising people to, contact David Wilcock. Nobody knows where Pete Peterson is, but contact David Wilcock and let him know that you want your money back. Because this money was raised under false pretenses with a text plea asking for the money that was filled with lies. And they can't just keep the money, folks. You can go to your bank. You can go to GoFundMe and say, I want my money back. I got scammed. And listen, really, I don't care if you gave $1, $10, $50. I don't care how much money you gave. Don't write it off. Because if you do that, you're just enabling criminals to be able to get away with this. So even if you gave a single dollar, take the time to go to your bank, laugh about it to the bank people if they, say, well, this is just $1. Yeah, and I got scammed and I got conned, and I'm not going to let these people do this to me even for a single dollar. I want my money back. File the paperwork. It only takes a few minutes to go to your bank and do that, or to go to GoFundMe and file a complaint. And I encourage each and every one of you who gave money under these false pretenses to do that. Now, I want to take the time to thank Bill Ryan and the people at the Project Avalon forums because they helped provide some of the information. I was having real trouble trying to verify Peterson's, whose legal name is actually Gary Dean Peterson. I was having a real trouble trying to verify his military service. So there's a member of the forum, Stefan Looney, Looney, who was kind enough. I reached out to Bill Ryan, who said he was kind of in the middle of something, and he asked these other forum members to help me, and they both reached out to me, and that was great. And in regard to Pete Peterson's claimed military service, now he claims that he got all these, medals and all of these things, and something really does not add up. I suspected that he had 0 military service, and I was kind of shocked that I was wrong about that, because Stefan Looney from the Project Avalon forums, he placed requests with the National Personnel Records Center, and he got back a letter in regard to Pete Peterson's military service. And it says, thank you for contacting the National Personnel Records Centers. We are providing the releasable military service information based on restrictions imposed by the military services, consistent with the Department of Defense regulations and the Freedom of Information Act. And it says, Gary Dean Peterson served on active duty in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve from November 25th, 1962 to May 10th, 1963, from March 27th, 1967 to June 1st, 1967, from June 2nd, 1967 to September 13th, 1970. And the veteran served in the U.S. Marine Corps from September 14th, 1970 to 1972. So he did some actual military service in the U.S. Marine Corps as a member of the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve on the dates listed that this Stefan Looney got back from the National Personnel Records Center. But I still have a lot of questions about his military service, because if you look at his bio, he's saying that he did all these incredible things, and it doesn't add up, folks. It just doesn't add up. And I guess I have to go to somebody that's more familiar with the military, because I'm not sure, that somebody that was in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve would be getting all these foreign medals from foreign countries, as he's claimed. Considering he said that he got the Russian Order of Lenin, award that he never received, I'm not sure that he received any military awards. There will have to be a tremendous more amount of research. Now, usually, if somebody is making fantastic claims, one of the things that you would do is say, well, can we see your DD-214s? And apparently somebody did try to get his DD-214 forms, and they were denied because they didn't have a legal right to them. And the DD-214 would show whether what he's saying in his bio, full of fraudulent information that we've proved tonight, is accurate, or if that's more fabricated, nonsense. I don't know. Now, at the request of Bill Ryan, there was another person who helped me that I want to thank, and that was Gemma13 on the Project Avalon forums, or maybe it's pronounced, or he would prefer that it's pronounced Gemma, Gemma 13 on the Project Avalon forums, because he did send me some notes regarding the military service and the DD-214. What I would say is this. He said he requested a DD-214, and the DD-214 will provide a lot of information, including medals and citations awarded. Had we been able to get his DD-214, we would have more information about his military stint, including citations and medals awarded. But apparently we cannot get the DD-214 unless we have a legal right to it, such as a veteran or family member who needs a DD-214. And that form is a very important document for the veteran and family. We do not fit the class of people who can get the DD-214. So there's a distinction between veteran and family and personal representatives and so on, and others who are not in that class. So we can't get the DD-214. If we could, that would prove that he got his medals, that, all these medals and awards and citations that he is claiming. And I have to say that I reached a complete and total dead end trying to verify some of this man's military claims. And I gotta say, big, huge shout out to Solar Marshall, the man who knows. That's what I call him. He's like the oracle. Whenever I get really stuck on something, I go to him and he gives me all these new avenues. Whenever I get stuck or hit a dead end, he gives me some new ideas and things I can do. So I was talking to him about some of this stuff that I was trying to verify, and we went, he was trying to help me, like, let's find the yearbooks and verify this stuff, but unfortunately the Marines only show pictures of graduating classes. They don't show the names of the people in the class, and the Air Force does, so that's a little easier. So I was kind of hitting dead ends. One of the points that he makes that I think is very important is that basically Pete Peterson is claiming that he became an officer somewhere in the middle of his military service. First of all, you needed to go to college and to officer training school to be an officer in the military. You don't suddenly, in the middle of your military service, just drop everything and go to college. That doesn't happen. So I think that's a fabrication. I would be very interested to see what his rank in the U.S. Marine Reserves was, or while he was active duty for that two-year period where he served as an active actual Marine Corps member, not a reserve member, from September 14th, 1970 to October 2nd, 1972. I don't know what else I can say about all his claims of his grandiose things he did in the military, because we couldn't verify any of them. But I want to thank Solar Marshall once again. Big shout out to him for really trying to help me and pointing me in all these different directions and giving me things I could try. All his grandiose claims about all these things that he did in the military, including being a nuclear demolitions expert and all these other things, I don't think we're ever going to be able to verify. But considering all the grandiose claims he made about being an early, personal computing pioneer, those turned out to be completely and totally a fabrication. I'm pretty sure, and I invite everybody to read the grandiose description of himself as a U.S. military man and all the medals that he won and all the things that he did, again, including being involved with nuclear technology. I really am suspect of it. I don't believe it's true. Now, the next thing I'd just like to talk about is what happened to all that GoFundMe money. Almost $60,000. Nobody is quite sure what happened to it because nobody has been able to talk to this Pete Peterson to verify that David Wilcock indeed gave him the money. There's all these rumors swirling around about what happened to the money. And I considered compiling the rumors and reading them so people could say, just so people could see, here's all the things that people are saying happened to the money. And, I am very, very suspicious about where the money went because I tweeted directly, as I said, to David Wilcock saying, listen, I have to be fair. And I know I was really aggressive and hard in this report, but I felt I have to be. But when I tweeted to David, I'm just kind of like, here's, people are saying you did this with the money instead of giving it to Pete Peterson. Is that true? People want to know where the money went. David Wilcock, can you explain where the money went? Crickets. Silence. He's never responded. And I gotta say, I know it's not an indication of any kind of guilt on his behalf, but if someone was accusing me of stealing $60,000 from an old disabled veteran that is apparently has some, mental problems right now, I certainly wouldn't let those rumors continue. I would set the record straight. And I don't know why David Wilcock won't just come forward with some kind of statement about what happened to all this money. So, a lot of people on Twitter talking about this, and I'm sending a request to another show host who has David Wilcock on a show more than anyone, saying, why don't you ask him about this GoFundMe money? And of all people, Corey Good chimes in on Twitter. And this was April 17th at 5:30 p.m., and Corey Good says, good old Pete got every penny. I am told he promptly put it all into silver as he doesn't trust banks after they took his house. So here's Corey Good saying, yeah, Pete Peterson got the money and he promptly put it all into silver. And there's a few things that just popped into my head as soon as I read that tweet. And the first is, isn't it convenient that good old Pete got the money and he put it into silver? Because if he did that, then, then it's just some guy running around with $60,000 in silver coins in a big bag or something, and no one can get their money back if GoFundMe comes after him for fraud. And also, if he truly did convert this money to silver, then it's convenient. There's no paper trail. And the authorities will not be able to, say, seize a bank account of either Wilcock or Pete Peterson where the money is. I think it's very suspect, and until I hear it from Pete Peterson himself that he got the money and converted it to silver, I'm sorry, I'm not going to believe that, especially from the blue chicken cult leader, Corey Good. And I also think that it's a little suspect that David Wilcock is too cowardly to respond, but he sends the blue chicken cult leader, Corey Good, to explain what happened to that money and tie up those loose ends for him. So as I start to wrap up this investigation, I'm really left with the feeling that there's, going to be some consequences here in one form or another for the people involved in this GoFundMe, because it was all based on a lie. More than one lie. It was all based on a page full of lies that they told to get people to click that donate button. And I have to also say that this fake whistleblower of David Wilcock's is only one of a long line of his fake whistleblowers, whose background is extremely suspect. And, I really think that it says everything about David Wilcock, that he could have done all the research that I've presented to you tonight, but he either chose not to, or he did, and he didn't want to screw up the ability to sell a good story. So he ignored all the evidence that man is a complete and total fraud and ran with it. And I gotta say, I think he should have to give the money back. How much money did Gaia TV pay him to go on Gaia TV and help tell this man's story? He didn't vet this man at all. He didn't do an ounce of research, not 5 minutes, or he did, and he didn't care that the guy was a complete total fraud and just took the paycheck anyway. In either of those cases, I think he should have to give the money back. So I challenge David Wilcock, give the money back. Give it to charity. I challenge David Wilcock on the GoFundMe money. Come on, this is not right. You run around preaching about karma and love and light, right? And this is what you're doing? You're going on a GoFundMe? You're posting to an immense following on social media, begging people to give money to a GoFundMe for a guy that's a complete and total fraud and not a real government insider? You have zero proof the man ever worked for the government except for the Marines. That's it. And you don't have that proof, and you probably never took the time to get that proof. Somebody else did that for you too, David, because you were too lazy to do it. And I gotta say, it's not just the Gaia TV money and the GoFundMe money that David Wilcock generated in relation to this fake whistleblower that he's been promoting and supporting and selling. It's not just the money from all the conference appearances where he's talked about this guy. He also has been selling Pete Peterson's bullshit made-up fake stories in one of his books for a long time now, and that book is The Ascension Mysteries. David Wilcock, I gotta say, like, I can't decide. Is he stupid to put a book on Amazon filled with stories from this fake fraud, early computer pioneer and government insider, and he didn't vet the guy? His book is filled with stories about this Pete Peterson person. And I gotta say, like, I think he should give the money back from that book, because that book is filled with stories of Pete Peterson and all this government insider stuff that he got from Pete Peterson. But look, folks, we've shown what a fraud this Pete Peterson is. How come David Wilcock went to the trouble to write an entire book that's got tons of stories of Pete Peterson and all this stuff in the book, and he didn't even bother to check the guy's education? He didn't bother to check the guy's military service. He didn't bother to figure out that this guy claimed to work for the Russian equivalent of NASA but never did. He didn't bother to figure out that this guy claimed that he got, the Russian Order of Lenin award, like their highest civilian award, but that he really didn't, that was a fake story. He didn't bother to do any of that. He just wrote a book filled with stories from this fake fraud asshole and went on selling it at UFO conferences, lecturing on it, going on Gaia TV and selling this guy's story. He should have to give every penny of the money that he has generated connected to Pete Peterson back. He should not get to keep it, because it's all lies, folks. It's all lies, based on what I can only describe now, having researched him, as a complete and total pathological liar. I don't know if any of you have ever been unfortunate enough to know or encounter a pathological liar, but read this guy's bio. He makes himself out to be this big, grandiose figure in history, and all of it is lies. That, my friends, is the mark of a pathological liar. That a pathological liar will always make themselves out to be the hero of the story. They're this big important person, and here's why, and here's all these fake accomplishments. And David Wilcock didn't check any of this stuff. He sold the story of what can only be described as a pathological liar for years and years. Then he goes and writes a book full of this guy's fake stories, and has been selling that book for years and years. And by the way, you can go buy that book yourself for it's $12.33 on Amazon. You can go and buy this book for $12, and it's worth $12 for the laughs. But I really don't want to encourage anybody to buy a book full of lies and put more money in this asshole David Wilcock's pocket. Somebody sent me a really nasty email that I gotta stop saying that people like David Wilcock sell bullshit. I mean, I don't know what else to call David Wilcock's profession except a bullshit salesman. He's been running around taking money from UFO conference organizers, talking about this fake fraud storytelling bullshit artist Pete Peterson, and he took their money. And what he gave them back was bullshit. It's all fake, folks. I've proven that this guy is complete total fraud. He took their money. Then he writes a book filled with stories from this idiot. And that's more money that he's taking from people, and everything in the book related, at least, to this Pete Peterson is bullshit. Then he goes on GoFundMe and begs everybody to give this guy a whole bunch of money, and he raises $60,000 with a bunch of bullshit stories that weren't accurate at all about this guy. What else do you call David Wilcock but a bullshit salesman? I don't know what else to call him. He sells bullshit, folks. That's what David Wilcock does. He sells bullshit. And it's not just this Pete Peterson thing. Listen, let's say he was a good researcher and he actually presented, factual information and found some kind of evidence once in a while and lectured on that and wrote books on that, and then maybe he made this one mistake. He was too trusting and he didn't take the time to vet this guy or do enough research to figure out that he was a bullshit artist. I would give him a pass. I would totally give him a pass. But that's not what you get with David Wilcock. Pete Peterson is just the latest in a line of fake whistleblowers that David Wilcock's been running around and selling. And I gotta say, it's not just David Wilcock that's responsible for this fraud stuff happening. There are other people just as guilty that have enabled him and helped him. And those people know who they are. And a lot of people are, really sending me nasty stuff about other show hosts and saying, you should say this, and I'm not going to say anything. That guy knows who he is. That guy has enabled David Wilcock to sell this bullshit for years now. And that show host also enabled David Wilcock to sell this GoFundMe scam. And that's what I'm calling it. It's a GoFundMe scam. So, if you have a show and somebody's going to come on and say, oh, these armed police officers are they're attacking my whistleblower, and they're digging holes and dumping all of his personal belongings into it, and they're riding over it, with bulldozers and destroying all of his property. I gotta say, as a host of a show, I'm gonna check that out before I let a guy tell those stories. But that show host didn't ask any hard questions, because that's not what he does. And that show host, he's actually worse than a bullshit salesman, because he's not even good enough to be a bullshit salesman himself. So what he is he's like the guy that's pushing the cart full of bullshit down the street. While the bullshit salesman stands in front selling all the bullshit, he's pushing the bullshit cart for the bullshit salesman. He's a lackey, a puppet of the bullshit salesman, which is even worse than being the bullshit salesman. And of course, all these people that enable David Wilcock and Pete Peterson and people like them to sell bullshit, they like to absolve themselves of any responsibility. No, you're helping the guy sell his bullshit stories. That's what you're doing. Stop being a coward. Stop copping out. Start taking responsibility for the people that you're hurting, letting this guy on your show do these things. Because you helped this person steal from all the people in the community. You helped him tell the bullshit story. You gave him a platform. Directly or indirectly, you helped this GoFundMe scam happen by giving this person a platform and free advertising to get that story about those bulldozers and the armed police. And all these fake stories that you let this guy on your show tell somehow ended up on that GoFundMe page. And you're just going to wash your hands and say that you're not responsible for what happened at all? That you weren't involved in this? No, I don't think so. There's going to be consequences for anybody that has helped this asshole take this money under false pretenses. And I gotta tell you folks, this broadcast is just the opening salvo, the first round of the fight. I'm done sitting on the sidelines. I've taken the gloves off. The gloves are off, folks. And it's going to be a bumpy ride for these fake fraud storytelling bullshit artists going forward. Few people have asked me what's going to happen next. And the truth is, I don't know. But I can tell you this. I mentioned the resistance in the beginning of this broadcast. The resistance has started. It's begun. Because yes, there are these fake fraud storytelling bullshit artists out there selling bullshit, stealing from people for lies. And it's been going on for years. But lately especially, there have been more voices of resistance being raised against this happening. And those voices are getting louder. And I also have to say that lately, there has been a tremendous amount of what I can only describe as synchronicity. Throughout this investigation, which I've presented my findings tonight, I have found new allies. Everything just sort of fell into place like a perfect puzzle. You know, like dropping a 1,000-piece puzzle out of a box, and that puzzle just mysteriously comes together as it falls onto the floor. I could not have asked for better help. Something felt strange. I got this feeling of deja vu while I was running through this investigation, because everybody that I called for help, you know, sometimes you go and you try to research these things and people are not very helpful. They don't really want to get involved. I can't tell you how, nice and helpful everyone that I reached out to was in this investigation. And it felt strange to me because that's not the way it usually goes, folks. Normally you make 10 phone calls, nobody calls you back, you hit dead ends. This went differently. And I had this weird feeling of deja vu or synchronicity the entire time I was doing this investigation into this fraud Peterson. And some time ago, I also recently happened to meet a retired federal law enforcement officer who is now doing some private investigation work. He is somewhat interested in these topics and some of the things I am doing. And he has offered to help me with some of the investigative work that this work requires. I am going to avail myself of his excellent experience and help. We may also have some legal help, because when one of these fake fraud storytelling bullshit artists slaps a legal threat letter on someone speaking out against them, we're going to need legal help to stop those people from trying to intimidate people with legal threats and silence them. We may have access to that. I'm hopeful that there will be new allies and new weapons will be brought to bear in this battle. This, my friends, is just the first battle, and the war is going to rage on. But what about you? What are you going to do? Are you going to sit on the sidelines like I once did and let these fake fraud storytelling bullshit artists continue to steal money from people, selling lies? Or are you going to find your courage, find your voice, and get involved and help to stop them? Now, in regard to this fake fraud Peterson, I also want to mention that somebody sent me a 20-page document about their own investigation into Peterson and all of the lies and fraud, which is a treasure trove of information, but I just got it right now as I'm doing the wrap-up for our show. And I've taken a little bit of time to look at it, and I got to tell you that if you thought all of the things that I presented tonight make him look like a fraud, just wait until I have time to digest this 20-page document full of more evidence of his fakery and fraudery. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of this, because I think this information is important and people deserve the truth. And as far as David Wilcock, who is perhaps either the world's worst researcher or a con man, and is definitely the world's worst psychic or intuitive, all I can tell you, Mr. Wilcock, is you better buckle up, because it's going to be a bumpy ride going forward. Soon, I am going to have new and exciting things to share about Mr. Wilcock. So the battle continues. And as for me, and for everyone listening to this broadcast, know that you can always contact me as Stephen Cambion on Twitter or on Facebook. You can reach us at themidnighthour.home.blog, our website, to check out our previous episodes and keep up to date with what we're doing here with the Midnight Hour show. I want to thank each and every person that has helped me with our investigation into this fraud, Peterson, and Shady Shilcock, David Wilcock. I can't thank those people enough for taking the time to help me reveal these things about these guys. And I want to remind my listeners that this is a war, and the war is going to continue and rage on. And I guess I would close this broadcast with something a much wiser man than I once said, and that would be William Sherman, who said, "War is the remedy that our enemies have chosen, and I say, let us give them all that they want." Good night, folks.